guys, welcome back to the Heritage Home Family Farm podcast, where we're talking about all the things farming, homesteading, and being real and honest with you about the things that we've learned along the way, sharing some of our story. And we're pretty new to this still, but I think it's important to be honest about the newness as we're new and as a lot of people are entering into this realm of trying to produce more or make more things from scratch. And I was listening to something the other day where they were actually talking about the phenomenon that so many people who've moved into the homesteading world are now moving back to the city because they decided it was too much work, or maybe not what it was sold to be. Maybe they thought it was going to be something that it wasn't. So we're trying to be honest with you guys, and we hope that ultimately it's encouraging and you learn something along the way.
Because the thing is that anyone can be an expert, right? They don't have to have credentials necessarily. They just say they've done this or that, and this is their experience. And if you've listened into our episode number 1 about how we came to be Heritage Home Family Farm, you will hear that we not necessarily picked the best location for garden growing.
Like if you were looking for if you're looking for the best ground or some of the best ground to grow vegetables and fruit, we left that actually. We didn't own much of it. We owned just a tiny bit in a city, but we left that and we moved here to Southeast Idaho instead. And it was a strategic move. It was a strategic move for freedom, for culture, for the decisions related to schooling and health, seasons, closeness to extended family, but maybe not the most strategic move when it came to the actual ground that we moved to.
And we've learned a lot about that along the way. We're excited to share it with you, but we also, just like Darren said, want to bring the realness, the raw, the truth about homesteading to you, not to scare you, but to empower you. If you are looking at choices of homesteading, if you're currently in homesteading and things are just not working, hey, join the club. We are all on a road of discovery and growth together. You may have heard Darren cough here a moment ago. We, as a family, are passionate about our loose leaf teas that we sell on our farm, Heritage Home Family Farm. And today we are drinking our Sippin' Tea. This is a wonderful tea that can be drank cold or hot, and is to boost that immune system with vitamin C.
Yeah, and has a really unique and delicious flavor, really. All of our teas that we make are our own family recipes. So it is part of our passion that comes from our kitchen and from our kind of reading and our tastes and our research. And it is loaded, like Marissa said, with stuff that provides awesome vitamin C. And I think it has a flavor also that is complex and delicious that you don't find anywhere else kind of on the market. And our daughter says that it's her favorite right now.
Everything that we have in this family has to be family friendly.
Oh, yeah.
It has to be able to be consumed by our children, our 7 children. I think there is 2 spice mixes that we have that some of them say a little spicy.
Yeah, those are my favorites, but not always my favorites. As you mentioned, we do some spice mixes too, not just some, quite a few.
Yeah, and we're going to tell you about one that is one of our most popular, best-selling spice at the end of this podcast. So if you want to know about it, make sure to tune in to the end.
But let's talk about the dirt. Let's talk about the dirt.
Oh, you're so funny.
10 acres of Idaho's finest.
Well, Rigby's finest.
Rigby's finest.
And I joke about that because there are 3 R's in this area. Rigby, Rexburg, and Roberts.
And Ryrie.
And Ryrie. Oh, there's 4. Oh, my word. And every R has better soil than Rigby.
Yeah, and we didn't quite know that about the very specifics of the geography. We knew that we were moving to high desert.
Right.
Our elevation here is like 4,800 feet-ish, 47.7 or something. And so we're elevated, and we're between a couple mountain ranges and a pretty wide valley.
Yeah.
and there's not a lot of rainfall. Most of our rainfall comes in the form of snow, and total precipitation for the year of inches of rain, not inches of snow, but inches of, is like 12 inches a year of rain.
So we don't have rain barrels.
No, yeah, so that plays your point. So we're here, we're talking about the land, we're talking about where we're located.
Yeah, that is our specific conversation today, is about the land that we purchase, the pros, the cons, and in order that it may help you to either navigate a purchase or to navigate maybe some difficulties on your own personal property.
Yeah, to weigh the options. I think there's a lot of resources out there to look at on the internet to say, what are the top 7 things? You like ChatGPT, right? Or some sort of AI even will scour the web for you if you don't find an expert's blog post on it that says these are the top things that you need to consider when buying property for homesteading. And let me tell you that while very practically those things might be true in a conventional mindset, if there are other factors that are playing into your decision outside of the specific productivity of your land, then you have to take those things into consideration, and then that changes your order of priority or your ability to do different homesteading or farming type activities on the actual land that you end up buying.
Right. There is, as we mentioned last podcast episode, that we tend to have a list, a dream list of what we want in a future property, but there are some lines on that list that trump others. And I think that that's important to have a conversation about before making a purchase and even after.
Like even one that we had to consider was the actual cost per acre, and then really determining what are the things that you think that your aptitude and your passion play into when it comes to what you're going to produce on your land. So for example, for the same price, we could buy 1 acre in the Willamette Valley if you got a good deal, or we were able to buy 10 acres in eastern Idaho.
Yeah.
And that is a
Both
massive...
of them not cultivated.
Right, yeah, not developed.
Excuse me, developed.
Yeah, in Oregon, you're literally just getting some field.
Or forest.
And here in eastern Idaho, we were able to get a field that had been farmed with monocrop farming.
Right.
And so, but you have to weigh, does the aptitude of what I want to do lend itself to a 1 acre plot? That includes driveway, house, anything else that you want. Does it lend itself to a 1 acre plot, or are you looking at producing things that require more space?
Right. And just because you do get a property or are looking at a property with more space, if it's not usable space, then it doesn't matter.
You know, we looked at one property, and by acreage, it was decent, but there was a section of the land that was on the top, and then it went down a steep hill into a seasonal brook, and then there was a little, like, up the other side of the hill, bottomland. Overall, maybe the acreage was, 5 or 6 acres.
Yeah.
Maybe it was even 8 acres.
Maybe it was 8.
But the actual usability based on the terrain was going to be impaired. You were only able to build things in certain places. You'd have to consider seasonally crossing a brook. They got a lot of snowfall in that area, and so you had to consider, like, well, it's a fun hill for sledding, but not a fun hill in a tractor to take hay out to the goats that are on the other side of your seasonal brook or
right.
your hole in the ground.
So in order to purchase or to look at and dream, you need to know, like what Darren's saying, what is your desired outcome with the property that you have in mind? You know, are you trying to just grow a garden? Are you trying to have cattle? Are you trying to grow for a long period of time? Do you want a season off? So lots of different things to consider. And as we are going to talk about our property here, there are things that are limiting factors here in our property, and there are things in abundance on this property.
Yeah, and so maybe let's just list out what some of those are. So, as Marissa mentioned, we're in Rigby, Idaho, and the overall terrain, high desert, old riverbed. And I don't know if we realized quite what an old riverbed this valley is.
We have enough rocks to pave an easement at Pebble Rocks.
Oh, yeah. It should have been a clue, like, early on when we were driving down one of the back roads, and there's, like, those wire fences that are just filled with river rocks. And that should have been, like, the clue. So
it's not just decorative.
No, that's not... Nobody paid to bring those rocks in. Those rocks came right out of the dirt. And we learned that pretty quickly. And we adapted quickly.
Yes.
And it's taken some time. And you learn some regional terminology. But overall, what we're expressing to you is that the amount of toil required to dig in the dirt is significant. The difficulty of growing things in the dirt is challenging. And along with the rainfall being low, then the dirt drains really quickly and does not hold water like more alive and less rocky soil would.
Yeah, so the learning curve brought us garden boxes.
Yeah, so instead of like our main kind of crops that we wanted to grow garden-wise, we quickly assessed that the best thing to do was going to be to give ourselves some cultivated dirt above the existing grade that was hopefully going to be higher quality dirt.
And we looked into what vegetation does well in drainable soil.
Yep.
As well as high drought. For example, lavender does great.
Right.
Asparagus needs quick draining,
Yep.
but it does also need a lot of water. So we put those in the flood
Right.
zone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just and so then I was going to say too, like you talk about the local language then. So we ordered some topsoil from Facebook Marketplace. You find a guy that's got a dump truck load. They're building a new subdivision somewhere. They're scraping off topsoil. Free and clear, no rocks. It's screened or whatever, right? And this was good, and it looks really good when it showed up. It looked okay. And then we quickly realized that this topsoil
It's like
was,
clay.
was really just clay. It looks good if it's just the right moisture, but then once it dries out, it just blows away. And then in the spring, or if you water it, it is just
Hard.
clay.
Yeah.
And so quickly learning, then even, and I say quickly because we're getting ready to go into our second whole summer here, our second whole growing season here on the farm. And we learned last year that when we thought we had amended soil enough, we have more amending to do.
Right, and a lot does have to do with the monocrop too.
Yeah.
In our fields, our first summer here, we were living in our trailers. We hadn't even moved into the house yet, and it was kind of like a Hail Mary: throw the corn seed out into the pasture, and hopefully we can grow some corn. And we had success. We had a lot of success the first year. And then the second year came around and we tilled it up and we tried to get rid of some of the alfalfa in the area, and we planted a bunch of corn, and it was an epic fail.
Yeah.
And we realized it was because we did not put back nutrients into the soil.
Yeah, and trying to figure out...
And that's put lightly.
Which nutrients the alfalfa takes out and which nutrients the corn uses, and then... I don't know if you know alfalfa, but it is a wonderful crop for hay production, really high protein feed for livestock. You can't turn cows loose on it though. And so this is like, because
not until it has frosted.
Right. So during the main part of the growing season, it's because our field is like, in some spots 90% alfalfa, and in other spots maybe 70% alfalfa. It's not safe during the main part of the growing season to turn cows loose on it because they'll overeat and they'll bloat. It's too rich. But like Marissa said, after it frosts, you can. If you get the percentage of what's growing in your field down to 50% alfalfa, I've read that you can. But that in itself, so that's one factor related to animals that buying an alfalfa field did for us. But then the other factor is alfalfa also doesn't die very easy.
No.
It's a drought resistant hay crop.
And it grows wonderfully here.
That has an incredible root system that it comes back from every year. And eventually it'll die out.
Right. It has like a 7-year life.
Right.
Ish.
But then it still stays alive. It just doesn't produce as much as it did the first 7 years.
Right.
And so, we're not quite sure, but maybe year 4 or 5 coming up of alfalfa, or maybe I think it's year 4 is our guess more than 5.
Okay.
But so we got pros and cons on both sides. So like we have partnered with another local farmer to come and cut and bale the alfalfa. That's a tremendous benefit.
We get money from that for our farm.
Yeah, you can sell the alfalfa hay, you can keep the alfalfa hay for your own animals, but the downside is, like Marissa was mentioning, you can till and till and till and weed and weed and weed and plant corn, and then you know what comes up first? Alfalfa.
Yep, in a hurry.
And it's not like, oh, I'm just gonna like reach over and like pull it out when it comes up. Like you break off the root and it comes back again.
Yep.
And philosophy-wise, the locals will tell you, well, just get out there with some 2,4-D and you spray that and you can plant, a Roundup-ready corn and you're fine. But philosophy-wise, that's outside of why we wanted to grow some of our own stuff. And so my caution to you, or my lesson that we've learned, isn't don't buy an alfalfa field. It's know what you're buying. And then know what your plan is to combat or to take advantage of what you have.
Because one way that we have taken advantage of having an alfalfa field is that we were able to, our first full summer here on the farm, we raised 175 meat birds, pasture poultry.
Yeah.
We let them be on pasture the entire time. We'll have a whole episode on this. And we were able to move them daily to new pasture, new fields, and alfalfa, as Darren mentioned, is high in protein. So
they gobbled it up.
They gobbled that protein up, and then they, pooped it back into the land. So we're hoping that as we do this year after year, that we are going to benefit from the alfalfa more than in other areas of gardening. Yeah,
and so it was, and maybe that's a little unconventional. I think it's reasonable to say that. So a lot of times when you listen to something that talks about homesteading, they'll say like start small, start with a garden, then maybe add, and whoever's writing the article has a favorite animal, right? It's sheep, or it's egg-laying chickens, or it's, whatever kind of particular thing that is. And because we knew that it was going to be years of amending to get soil that's really rich and fertile to where we want to grow crops that are doing really well, we probably dove into the meat production side of things faster because we might not have optimal ground for cultivating and growing, but we do have space. And like Marissa mentioned, we do have alfalfa that's just a rapidly growing green crop that's full of good nutrients that anything you put out on it will eat it. And so we just partnered those things together. And then, I think I mentioned this like in the beginning maybe of this episode, you have to kind of craft what your idea of homesteading includes, or your idea of what feels like it's within your wheelhouse and within your aptitude to produce. We want to be producers of food and nutrients and produce things that have financial feasibility. And so we felt like meat chickens aligned with that kind of aptitude. I enjoy butchering things. They are not an animal that required a significant amount of fencing infrastructure. We were able to build mobile shelters for them relatively cost effectively. And even out of some free stuff that we had inherited and drug with us out here.
I'll tell you all about in that podcast. You'll love it.
So we'll talk more in depth about that in the future, but I think that's to say, like, put those things together in that assessment of what type of land do I have, or what type of land am I looking at, and then what are my aptitudes, and what do I have time to do, and then you land where you land for that year. And maybe it changes or grows or adapts year over year as you're able to build systems and infrastructure that supports the work. And as you're able to train the workers.
Yeah.
Which is an important part. And then this last year, Marissa was pregnant all spring, brand new baby at the end of August. And so that adds a huge additional workload that's very important to us of our family. But that cuts out part of the ability, time and energy wise, to put into different aspects that Marissa's more passionate about, or more trained in, or more educated in than I am. And so then you figure out how you work the best together as a team.
The truth is, there's no Garden of Eden. Right? Like,
I thought that was a book.
That is. I mean, back to Eden. Which he has some great ideas in that book too. But
it's really great principles.
Really great principles. I think what I'm trying to get into our mind is that there are pros and cons to every property. And sometimes, as this next one I'm going to go into, it's not just the physical property that you're working with. It's also the climate. Here in Eastern Idaho, there is technically 4 seasons. But the winters are long.
The winter part of it kind of dominates the rest.
Definitely. At first, I was very worried about that when it came to homesteading. We would be out in the elements. We would not have as long season-wise to grow. We would have to start everything in a greenhouse. Those are all the concerns, but those are also all of the dealing with, or the conclusions to, having a short growing season. And then after our first year, I kind of started to realize why some people appreciate short growing seasons. I follow a lot of people on social media for different farms and homesteads. You can follow us if you're interested at Heritage Home Family Farm on Instagram. We're also on Facebook as well. But I'm watching these friends, right? Well, I call them friends. I don't know if they know me.
You feel like you know them, right?
I'm watching them, and it is November. It's, like the first week of December, and they're still producing, and they're still processing, and they're still canning, and they're still harvesting. And I was just like, oh, wow.
Like, our garden's been folded up for months.
For months. And I remember our children this year, they're like, yay, it's winter. We get to do more as a family. Because it can be all-consuming. And so that's kind of like a cautionary thing I want to share with you if you're a mother or if you have a family, that when you dive into homesteading, and this is not our full-time job, this is not our profession.
Oh, no, this is like for fun.
This is for fun. But you do put a lot of hours into when you are doing certain things. And we grew a lot this summer in our overall homestead. We added double the meat birds, and we added hogs and did hog butchering classes. We increased our garden space. We also participated in farmers markets. We increased the different products that we have available and offer. So, like, with that increase, which is all wonderful, your time is also at play. And there is some beauty in rest. Actually, our chickens, our freeloading chickens right now.
Yeah, they're resting too.
They're resting.
It's like 20 degrees out, and they're laying not a lot of eggs.
But listen, they're designed for that.
Yeah.
They're designed to have their baby chicks in the spring when the sun is out longer. And they were designed that way for the success and survival of their babies, right? And sometimes we in our society can put modifications in, like lights, to keep them producing all year long. But what detriment or what is the con of that for our chickens? You know, an overproduced chicken, is that a happy chicken? I'm not sure.
Right.
I mean, I try to have conversations with them, but they run away from me.
But I think you mentioned, two things together. You mentioned the seasons being good and that it shortens the actual gardening season. And it shortens the chicken growing season, right? Because the meat chickens, you can't start your chicks too early in the spring because it's still too cold. And you could carry them a little further into the winter, but they start to run out of pasture and the weather starts to get kind of nasty. But we have figured out then with the climate that it was of tremendous benefit to us this year, raising and butchering and processing all of our own hogs. And like you mentioned, teaching that class on how to do that. We're able to do that after the garden's wrapped up, before the holidays, and in a season where the infrastructure of a walk-in freezer or a walk-in cooler wasn't required. We could safely do it with the ambient temperature outside.
Right.
You can slaughter a hog and cool it quickly.
Similar to hunting season.
Yeah, have it hang well, and then do all of your processing without worrying that you're going to have meat spoil on you.
Right. It's so good. There's definitely pros and cons to everything. One thing that we are growing in is our greenhouse. We developed our own greenhouse, and we will have a podcast on that for those that have questions. It also is a learning curve in a new climate. If you didn't know, here in eastern Idaho, it's zone 5. And we came from a zone 8. So it's quite a difference. And as Darren mentioned, a higher elevation, which plays into different breeds of animals that are more successful here. It plays into sourdough. I mean, because of the dryness. There's just a lot of different, fingers in all of the things. And if you listen to someone on a podcast, on a YouTube video, on social media, whatever you're getting your information from, a book, a blog, it is important to know what perspective of location, of what they're dealing with, of elevation, that the person you're getting wisdom from.
Yeah, so for example, I think if you are in the homesteading, farming, regenerative agriculture community, you know the name Joel Salatin.
Amazing
and
guy.
Incredible knowledge that he brings to the table. But you have to adapt the principles to match what your situation is. And so if he has this lush pasture of mixed vegetation, and he can tell you exactly, I think he lives in Virginia, 40 inches of rain a year, he can tell you exactly how many square feet per cow per day to rotate those cows on pasture and keep them looking right. And you cannot translate that square foot for square foot, acre for acre to eastern Idaho.
Right.
Where you have, instead of intermittent rains and good quality soil, you have flood irrigation every 2 weeks. And you haven't had a chance to develop your pasture into this rich, multi-species pasture mix yet. You have to take all those things into consideration as you're developing your systems.
And we really wanted to talk about this, not to be doom and gloom, but actually to be living in reality. That one of the devastations, I think, while people are leaving homesteading to return back to the city is because they didn't get the whole picture. They saw the beautiful outcomes and they wanted that, which I understand. I want that too. No fault to the desire, but we're just not talking about apples to apples in some cases.
And the little flip side of it too, I don't know if you see the reels or the memes about these just gorgeous chicken coops.
Yeah.
Or these incredible gardens with pea gravel and
the chandeliers in the chicken house.
Yeah. and just 2-inch broad cut cedar garden box, and that is a $6,000 tomato crop,
Yeah.
And just there's a little bit of reality in the middle of it where like there's a lot of scrounging on Facebook Marketplace and a lot of like how can I make this work for that, and what is the essential order of priority that we're putting, like what we're building and what we're adding each year into place. It's challenging, and like you said, we want to be real with kind of how we've made some decisions and particularly how our property has pushed those in different directions. And I think I mentioned earlier, like there's this big push locally. People say like, we'll just spray everything and get rid of what you don't want, start over 2 years later with what you do want. And, that's a consideration that you have to take into play as well as like, what is your philosophies for where you kind of draw the lines on different things related to the environment you're living in and then what you're putting into your body. And that's one of the things that's driven our spice mixes too in our own kitchen. So I know Marissa mentioned earlier in this episode that we would get around to sharing some of our spice mixes with you. And in particular, I think we have a great story with this one, which is really where it like landed back at home for us. So today I have our Fiesta mix. So this is, well, the kids joke first that if dad's in charge of dinner, it's tacos.
Always tacos.
And you can pretty much count on that. It's tacos, fajitas, quesadillas, taco soup, taco salad, you name it, but this one goes on it. And like Marissa mentioned in our last episode, they're all family friendly. So you're not looking at some crank 'em up hot Fiesta mix, but it is packed with flavor. And what it's not packed with is all the additives that you get if you go to the grocery store and you buy a taco mix or a fajita mix off the shelf. And we actually bought one package to compare with this. At one point last year, we were advertising and we were kind of showing the difference to some people, and somehow that package ended up onto the table instead of this. And multiple children that night had a stomach ache from dinner. And they're like, Dad, that wasn't our stuff. And that's because this, you can actually read all the ingredients. And it really is the perfect blend of salt, cayenne pepper, chili powder, cumin, and onion powder. And that's it. Sea salt. Real good for you quality ingredients. So you can get this on our website, Heritage Home Family Farm. You can track us down at the local farmers markets, and stay tuned because we'll also be sharing other videos on YouTube. So if you're not watching on YouTube, tune into the YouTube channel. You can see our kitchen a little bit, and you can tune into some other videos that are coming soon there where we're going to be sharing really practical kitchen stuff. And then as the year progresses, we'll hopefully get the podcast here out on the farm a little bit too.
Love it.
So we hope that this conversation's at least been thoughtful or thought-provoking for you when it comes to how you're considering addressing your property. Are you really using it for what the resources it has? And are you aligning those resources with your passions? Don't feel guilty if you aren't doing one of the quintessential homestead things, because that one might just not be for you. And if you're looking for property, look for one that matches all of your family vision, and then craft and shape your individual passions around producing with the property value and the property benefits that where you are looking has. So don't be discouraged, be encouraged, and we hope that our vulnerability gives you a little hope too. So have a blessed week.